Hello, my AP Econ students. We're back for a look at our Unit 4 practice for response questions. Now, I have sent you the rubric, so you probably have seen the right answers and see what you got right and wrong, but I want to make sure that you understand that in case that doesn't make any sense to you. On a sad note, originally, Siemens and I had planned on doing this at Los Dos Amigos. The idea would be we were sitting there eating lunch, and I'm trying to explain to him international exchange. Probably wouldn't have gone too well, but that was the point. And so it would have been comical, but unfortunately with restaurants closing, I'm back at my smartboard. But let's look at this here. So what's happening in question number 1? It says Japan attracts an increased amount of investment from the European Union, and it's asking us to draw a loanable funds graph. Now that's a little bit of a wrinkle. Usually they don't tie in loanable funds graphs to what's happening in the international market, but we're gonna go with it. So if you remember on this axis, okay, we want to do real interest rates. Remember, if it's the money market, it's nominal interest rates, but here it's real interest rates. And then, of course, we're talking about the loanable funds market, so it's going to be the quantity of loanable funds. And then, of course, the supply of loanable funds, SLF, and demand for loanable funds, DLF. Okay, and then our equilibriums. Okay, so what would happen to a loanable funds graph if all of a sudden a bunch of people started investing in Japan? Well, basically what's going to happen is a lot of money is going to start coming into Japan. Okay, so think about that. Money's going to be coming into Japan. How would that affect a loanable funds graph if more money is available? Well, that would increase the supply of loanable funds. All of a sudden, more people who want to borrow money, they would find that more money is available to them, and so supply of loanable funds increases, and that makes real interest rates go down. Okay, so I know that's a little bit different, usually not asked about that, but that's how you would rationalize that. Now, how does that affect employment, okay, in Japan in the short run? Well, to show you this, I'm going to show you an aggregate supply, aggregate demand graph, and again, you don't need to draw the graph to answer the question, but I do want you to see how employment would be affected. So, bottom line is you got your price level, your real GDP, and of course, SRAS. You do not necessarily need an LRAS based on what I'm going to show you here. You could put one on there if you wanted to, but I'm just trying to show you what happens to employment. So notice what happened here. Real interest rates went down. When real interest rates go down, it increases interest-sensitive expenditures. People are more likely to borrow money to buy homes, cars, start businesses, things like that. It also, as we learned last unit, increases investment spending within the country. In other words, businesses are more likely to invest in capital equipment and expand and build factories and things like that. Well, that's a lot of buying. All that buying is going to increase aggregate demand in the economy. Of course, when aggregate demand increases, you've got a higher real GDP. Bottom line is we're making more things, which is what GDP measures. We need more workers. And so employment, and again, you always have to pay attention when they ask about employment or unemployment. In this case, employment is going to increase. And the best way of explaining that is simply because aggregate demand increases. We're making more things, we need more workers. All right, so that's letter A. Now letter B, a whole different part of the world, different scenario. You've got real interest rates in Canada increase relative to Mexico. Now, remember, we talked about interest rates before. Whenever you have higher interest rates, that's where investors want to put their money. Investors want to invest in stocks and bonds and things like that in those nations because you're getting a better return. So bottom line is people want to put their money in Canada. So let's show you what a currency exchange market would look like. So this is the market for, it said, the Canadian dollar. So we've got the supply of Canadian dollars. Okay, the demand for dollars. Okay, the quantity of dollars. And then, of course, the million-dollar question, what goes on this axis? Okay, we're comparing the dollar to the peso. Is it pesos per dollar or is it dollars per peso? That's right, very good. It's pesos per dollar. Okay, so pesos per $1. We're trying to measure the value of the dollar in terms of pesos. So we've we've got our equilibriums, and now what do we know happens? Everyone wants to put their money in Canada because they have the higher interest rates. They're getting a better return, and the best way of rationalizing it is going to increase the demand for Canadian dollars. Again, you could also say a decrease in supply because they're not investing in other countries because they're going to keep their money at home, but I think this makes more sense to me, and that's going to cause the Canadian dollar to appreciate. Okay, it takes more pesos to get that dollar, so it appreciates. And because it has appreciated, because it takes more pesos to get a dollar, Canadian goods just became more expensive to people in Mexico. If Canadian goods are more expensive, are people in Mexico going to buy their stuff? Not as much. And so exports to Mexico are going to decrease. Okay, and again, they're going to decrease because you'd say, well, the Canadian things just became more expensive because the change in the value of the Canadian dollar. Okay, so that's question number one. All right, let's look at question number two. Now, I need to warn you, well, I don't need to warn you, you've already seen this. Question number two's got some funk to it. There's just a few things here that are a little bit different than how we've seen them before. So let's try to walk you through it. So first of all, what happens is this. 1 euro used to exchange for 0.58 Singaporean dollars. Now 1 euro exchanges for 0.6 Singaporean dollars. So what has happened? Before we do anything else, let's pause and ask what happened. What happened was the euro appreciated. Okay? It used to take $0.58 to get a euro. Now it takes $0.6 to get that same euro. The euro has just become more valuable. The Singaporean dollar, on the other hand, of course, has depreciated. Euro appreciates, it depreciates. So, how is that going to affect aggregate demand in Singapore? We'll look at it from the perspective of a European. 1 euro used to get you $0.58. Now 1 euro gets you 0.6. A euro gets more Singaporean dollars. That's going to make things in Singapore cheaper to Europe. And if they're cheaper, of course, they're going to buy more. And if they're buying more, aggregate demand is going to increase. Okay, and the explanation would just simply be goods in Singapore became cheaper to Europeans. So they're buying more goods. That's going to increase the aggregate demand for Singaporean goods. And then, of course, like we said a moment ago, if aggregate demand goes up, real GDP goes up. And that makes employment increase, okay, because of the increase in aggregate demand. Okay? So that's pretty simple. That's not bad. This is where it gets a little bit wonky, letter B. So it says, suppose Singapore wants to get the exchange rate back to what it originally was. Now remember what happened. The euro appreciated, the dollar depreciated. They want to reverse that. They want to somehow make the euro depreciate so that the dollar appreciates. So how can they do that? Well, I says, should the Singaporean central bank buy or sell euros in the foreign exchange market? And again, this is not something we've talked about before, but let's just think about it in terms of the market for the euro. Okay, so if we're talking about the exchange market for the euro, we got the supply of euros, demand for euros, okay, quantity of euros. And then over here, okay, again, this axis, why do we label it? We're comparing the euros to the dollar, so it's going to be dollars per 1 euro. Okay, so let's use this as our starting point to help answer letter B, part I. So, would the central bank want to put more euros in the world markets or take euros out by buying them? Well, in this case, they're going to want to sell euros. By selling euros, they're putting more euros out into the world. If more euros are out in the world, the supply of euros increases. And notice, of course, now it takes fewer dollars to get that euro, and they've reversed that appreciation of the euro. They've depreciated the euro and conversely appreciated the Singaporean dollar. Okay, I know that's a little tricky. I never talked about it in those terms, but that's the best way of looking at it. That action would increase the supply of euros, causing euros to depreciate, which is their goal. The other thing they could do, instead of dealing with world markets, what could their own central bank do within their country in order to change the value of the dollar? And so they're asking about an open market operation. Of course, anytime you hear an open market operation, it's either they're going to be buying or selling bonds and securities and things like that. Well, bottom line is they would want to sell securities, or you could say sell bonds. Now remember, when the central bank or the Fed sells bonds, they take money out of the economy. Now when the money supply goes down, what happens to interest rates? Very good, yes, interest rates go up because they always vary inversely. So money supply goes down, interest rates go up. Now, why is that important that interest rates go up? Well, remember what we said a moment ago, wherever interest rates are higher, that's where people want to put their money. Okay, so if Singapore has higher interest rates because the Fed has sold bonds, more people want to put their money in Singapore. That increases the demand for the Singaporean dollar, and that will appreciate the Singaporean dollar, which is their goal, to get their dollar to appreciate compared to the euro. Okay, so within their country, they could sell bonds to try to boost demand for their own currency. Okay, so that's another thing they can do. So again, I know it's a little bit tricky, but hopefully that makes sense now that I've gone over it. And the last one, number 3, this one isn't too bad here. So Mexico used to have a tariff on foreign imports of automobiles. Okay, now they've either reduced it and gotten rid of it. Bottom line is, automobiles are now going to be cheaper, okay, than they used to be. I don't want you anymore. Where am I at? Over here. Okay. So, automobiles are now going to be cheaper. That's good news for Mexican consumers of automobiles. They are going to benefit, right? Because you got more cars, you have more access to foreign cars at a lower price. So if you're a consumer, you love it. You get cars cheaper. Now, if Mexican consumers are buying more foreign automobiles, domestic automobile manufacturers are not going to be very happy about that. They are not going to benefit because people are buying more foreign cars. Okay? Now, if that's happening, let's talk about the current account balance. Well, the current account measures what? That's right, the exchange of goods and services. So, cars, either coming in or out of the country, are going to be affected by that. So if they're buying more foreign cars, money is leaving Mexico, and when money goes out, that puts their current account in deficit. Okay? Because more money, they're buying more foreign cars, so money's leaving. And of course, you know that if the current account is in deficit, the capital account has to be, very good, in surplus, okay? Because it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be positive. Okay? And then lastly, what happens to aggregate demand in Mexico? Well, if people are buying more foreign goods, that's going to cause aggregate demand to decrease, okay? Because they're not buying as many domestic goods, they're buying more foreign goods, okay? So again, hopefully that makes sense. Again, any questions, any part of that you want me to talk about more, shoot me an email or a text or whatever. I'd be more than happy to help you out. Otherwise, stay healthy, and as always, I hope to see you guys sooner than later.